So usually when I stand here in the kitchen and talk to you, it's because I'm about to cook up something really good. Today I'm not going to be cooking, but I want to talk for a little bit about Appalachian language, about the way we speak here in the mountains of Appalachia. It's something that's really dear to my heart, and I've been writing about it since 2008 when I first started The Blind Pig and the Acorn. That's my blog if you've never visited there. And I really didn't know as I was growing up that the words or the grammar or any of those things that we say or use was any different than anywhere else. And then when I was in college, I took an Appalachian Studies class. I didn't really take it because I wanted to. I just took it because I needed an elective. But during that class, I really fell in love with realizing that my culture was just somehow a little bit different than other cultures, that it was something special, something I should really take pride in. That was when I first fell in love with researching and learning more about all of things Appalachian, from the landscape to the people, the folklore, the language, the food, all those things. But one of the things the teacher did, Mr. Cabe, he was a great teacher, is that he had once a week for that semester, we had an Appalachian vocabulary test. Well, most of the time I didn't even need to study because I knew all the words. And I learned some other words, though, too, during that time that maybe people in other parts of Appalachia used that I didn't. But that was when I first really fell in love with the words and the language. And I still have those tests. I still have my notes from that class all those years ago. That's how much it meant to me that I kept them. Well, in the early 2000s, before I started The Blind Pig and the Acorn, there was this thing that kind of started, and I can't remember the gentleman's name that actually started it, and he wasn't focusing on Appalachian language, and he wasn't focusing on necessarily any kind of accents is what he was talking about. But he came up with this list of questions, and then also a list of words, and it was really just to kind of highlight the differences in the different areas of the country and even around the world, how people would use certain words, how they would say them, or how they would answer certain questions. And that kind of had a resurgence. Mostly it was used like in colleges, think communication classes and things like that. Kind of had a resurgence in about 2008 or maybe a little bit after that when I was writing for The Blind Pig and the Acorn. And a lot of people would send me those, like people at that time, mostly again college students, they would film themselves and put it on YouTube. And then they would share it with their class or with whoever. It kind of become a thing that people was doing. And a lot of people would send them to me and kind of suggest I do the same thing. Well, I never did do that. But I did find it really interesting, and I watched a lot of them. And of course, even then, I was drawn to the ones that were in Appalachia. I looked back and tried to find, there was one girl from West Virginia that I really wanted to share with you, but I can't find it. Maybe she don't have the channel anymore or took the video down. But it's really interesting just to hear like I said, he wasn't specifically talking about one accent versus another or what was right or what was wrong. He was just highlighting those wonderful differences and similarities that people have. So I'm going to take it. It won't take but a minute. I'm going to do it for you now, and then I'm going to talk about some other things. But what is it called when you throw toilet paper on a house? That was the first question. Well, I would call that TP in the house. I've never TP'd anybody's house, but I've heard about people doing it like on Halloween. What is the bug that when you touch it curls into a ball? So we call those roly-polies. And if I went outside right now under every rock around all my garden beds and my flower beds and lifted them up, I would see roly-polies. They're everywhere. What is the bubbly carbonated drink called? So here in my part of Appalachia, we call that Coke. We call it all Coke. We would say, do you want a Coke? And then we would say, I've got Sprite, Sunkist, and Grape, or Mountain Dew, or whatever you would have. So here it's commonly just called Coke. I remember when I was young growing up, my mother, Granny, some of her brothers and sisters moved to other places for work, and they never come home. I mean, they never moved back here, but they would come home every summer and bring their families, and it was always really exciting for them to get to come. New cousins you didn't see but once a year to play with, and stories to hear and all that. But I remember Paul and I were amazed that some of our cousins called Coke Pop. We thought that was so neat, so interesting, because we just called it all Coke and they called it all Pop. So that was one of the differences. What do you call gym shoes? I would call gym shoes tennis shoes. I say tennis shoes. Interesting kind of fun fact about that is my father, Pap, I never seen him in a pair of tennis shoes, not once in my entire life. What do you say to address a group of people? So if I come into a room and there's a bunch of people, I'm just going to say hello. Hello, how are you? That's probably what I would say. A lot of people say hi or hey. Especially one that I love that I hear in my part of Appalachia from some older folks that I know is they say how do. So if they walked in and seen you, they'd say how do, how do. I like that, but I don't use it myself. What do you call the kind of spider or spider-like creature that has an oval-shaped body and extremely long legs? So we call that a granddaddy long legs, a granddaddy long legs. Some people just say granddaddy, some people say daddy long legs. I know there's variations of that. What do you call your grandparents? When Granny was pregnant with me, her father died, so I did not know him. But her mother I called Granny, so that was Granny. On Pap's side, my grandparents were Mamaw and Papaw, so I had a Mamaw, a Papaw, and a Granny. What do you call the wheeled contraption in which you carry groceries at the supermarket? And even this question's funny to me because I would never say supermarket. I would just say grocery store. I'm going to the grocery store. So, but I call that contraption a buggy. I call it a buggy. When Corey and Katie were little and I'd have to take them with me to get groceries and I couldn't put them inside the buggy because then there would be no room for the groceries. I only went once a week, once every 2 weeks. And I would make them stand on the back of the buggy and hold on to the handle because they were, their little chins would be about right there, and they would stand there, so they were kind of between me and the buggy. So it helped let me have more room, but also for me to keep an eye on them, keep them out of trouble. What do you call it when the rain falls? When rain falls while the sun is shining? So here in my area of Appalachia, we say that when that happens a lot often in the summertime, maybe an evening shower and the sun comes out right as it's ending or something like that, we say the devil is beating his wife. That's what that means. What is the thing you change the TV channel with? We call that the remote control. Remote control. Reminds me of when Katie was just learning, just a little bitty, and they were learning how to talk. She called it the moat. So she was always wanting to moat. She didn't know how to work the moat, but she wanted to play with it and usually lose it, and then we wouldn't be able to find it. So that was the questions that he asked, and then here's the kind of the words. And because the way that I say them may not lead you to know what they are, I'm going to spell them out before I say them. So the first one is A-U-N-T. I say ant. I know a lot of people say aunt. I say ant. R-O-O-F, roof. R-O-U-T-E, route. For many years, we lived at Route 1, Brasstown. That was our address. W-A-S-H, wash. O-I-L, oil. T-H-E-A-T-E-R, theater. I-R-O-N, iron. S-A-L-M-O-N, salmon. C-A-R-A-M-E-L, caramel. F-I-R-E, fire. W-A-T-E-R, water. S-U-R-E, shore. D-A-T-A, data. R-U-I-N, ruin. C-R-A-Y-O-N, crayon. N-E-W-O-R-L-E-A-N-S, you would have probably got that one, New Orleans. P-E-C-A-N, pecan. B-O-T-H, both. A-G-A-I-N, again. I think you'll know this one. I don't need to spell it out. Probably. Spitting image. Alabama. L-A-W-Y-E-R, lawyer. C-O-U-P-O-N, coupon. Mayonnaise. S-Y-R-U-P, SERP, pajamas. C-A-U-G-H-T, caught. Naturally. Aluminum. That's one. That's a funny one for me because then I realize when I say it, I think I'm saying it wrong, and I probably am. But aluminum, like aluminum foil. And envelope. I say envelope. So those were the ones that he kind of used, as I said, not to be derogatory about any part of the country, just to show the different accents. And if you kind of search that accent test, you can find people from all over the world actually doing it, and it's really interesting. Now, since I've been writing about Appalachia, like I said, all the years since 2008, and it's really been the language has been one of my most popular features that I write about. And here on YouTube, it's been the same thing. It's been one of my most popular features. Well, on The Blind Pig and the Acorn, it's a much more intimate kind of smaller audience than here on YouTube. And the thing, I've got some wonderful comments on YouTube, and so many people, are glad that I'm highlighting our language, and they love it, and they love our accents and highlighting the way we speak and all those kind of things. But there's some people who don't like it, and it's for a variety of reasons. For an example, a comment I might get on one of my language videos would be you're celebrating ignorance. So they're buying into that stereotype, which is one of the really common ones about people in Appalachia, and I would say even people throughout the South, is that because of the way we sound, it means that we're less educated, that we're unintelligent. We didn't graduate high school. We didn't even go to school. We're hillbillies living in a shack somewhere. All those kind of things. So I get those comments like you're celebrating ignorance. And that, of course, is one of those stereotypes that is just not true. The way that you speak doesn't indicate your intelligence. It doesn't even indicate your college degree if you want to go by academics. I think common sense matters a whole lot more in this world than academic success, but it doesn't matter. That's not an indication of it. I've had people even ask me, well, didn't your teachers, what was up with your teachers? They didn't correct your language and make you speak right, which is comical to me because I live in Appalachia. My teachers, when I was growing up, most of them sounded like me. But they did teach me a lot. They taught me about from algebra to history to English to grammar to whatever. They did teach me all that. But they understood that the way that we communicate with each other is different than what they were as far as academics, what they were teaching me. I love to give the example of my nephews. I'm really proud of both of them. They're married now with kids of their own, but they grew up in this same mountain holler here where I live. They talk like I talk. Their mother and father talk like I talk, both of them. Steve, of course, grew up here with me. Their mother, Kim, grew up just kind of over the mountain there in the Bellevue section. And Ben and Mark, they both had full ride scholarships to Yale for their academics. So that's how smart they were, both of them. So again, that's just kind of one of those stereotypes that of course is not true. There's other ones, but that's one that really gets highlighted a lot, and probably the one that's still kind of the most believed for people, just to assume the way you sound indicates your education. And for me, we all need to communicate. That was what the gentleman that come up with the accent test, that's really what he was trying to kind of focus on, was the unique way that we do communicate and how varied and wonderful it all is. So if we are going to communicate, for me, I want it to be that rich, colorful, vibrant language, phrases, words, sayings that we use. I love that the Appalachian language really puts emphasis on things. For example, if I say that last night me and Matt ate a big bait of fish, I didn't need to say big, because if bait means big, why did I need to, like if we use that, a bait means a large amount, why did I need to put big in front of it? It's like a redundant or whatever. But no, I need to, because I really want you to know it was a really, really big bait of fish. Another one like that comes to mind is way up in the middle of the night I heard something. I could have just said in the night I heard something, but I want you to know it was way up in the middle of the night. I was really sleeping good. It was really, after midnight, it was way up in the middle of the night. So all those kind of the emphasis and the unique words and phrases, they just all, of course, speak to my heart, because this is where I was born and raised. But I really think if you're going to have to communicate, why not communicate in a colorful, vibrant, interesting way? Now, when the subject of all these kind of things come up about how we speak and the different accents and all those kind of things, especially when you're thinking about Appalachia, one of the most common ones that people focus on is, how do you actually say Appalachia? You've probably seen maybe the memes or the t-shirts that have like a picture of an apple, and they say, we say it like throw an apple at you. And you might have seen videos where people are kind of fussing back and forth about how you're supposed to say it. Of course, you hear me, I say Appalachia. It is interesting that people in other places say Appalachia. And a lot of times, for instance, the other night I was over in Blairsville, Georgia. I was giving a little talk, and at the end we had like a little Q&A. And a nice lady asked me, said, I have a question. I was born and raised in Appalachia, and but she said, I say Appalachia. I don't say Appalachia, even though that's where I was born. And I took a lot of grief for that. She lived further north, I think, is where she was born and raised. But now that she lived down in the southern highlands of Appalachia, she said, I take a lot of grief for that. And what do you think about it? And I said, well, okay, I'll tell you my opinion about it. Whoever taught you how to say Appalachia, that's how you learned how to say it. So how could it possibly be wrong? When I was taught to say Appalachia, I was taught to say Appalachia, not Appalachia. It's the same thing as, to me, as people that, a lot of commenters, I get a lot of comments, I say Okra, I don't say Okra. And a lot of people kind of comment, you're saying that wrong, or what is Okra? What are you talking about? Well, Pap and Granny taught me to say Okra. So that's how I say it. That's why I say it that way. And I feel like that about the argument between the Appalachia and the Appalachia. And it is funny, going back to the comments on the videos, we get such a wide variety of comments I do. And they're all, I love all of them. And I don't love the ones that say I'm celebrating ignorance, of course, but I love all the various opinions and the feedback, because it's interesting to see what people think. But there's lots of people who say, thank goodness you know how to say Appalachia. I'm so glad. But then there's a few people, one comical one that was like, I don't know when, but I remember was someone said, this woman doesn't know what she's talking about. She doesn't even live in Appalachia because she doesn't know how to say it. And then just yesterday I had one that said, it was like being nice to me. It was like, dear, you're saying Appalachia wrong. Bless your heart, kind of like. So they definitely, and both of those people said, they were born and raised in Appalachia, and I'm obviously saying it wrong. So that's kind of that argument. I say, wherever you learn how to say it, that's how you say it. It doesn't offend me if somebody says Appalachia, Appalachian Mountains. Doesn't mind. I don't mind. And it does seem like people maybe that was farther north, that's the way they learned how to say the word, whether it was at school or from their parents. And then farther south, we like those big exaggerated, the Appalachia, we like to put all those things in there. But that argument, it's interesting to hear people talk about it, but for me, it does not offend me for somebody to say Appalachia. But in the same way, I certainly don't think that I'm wrong for saying Appalachia. It's all those kind of things are fascinating, though, to think about it. I always go back to me and Matt. We've been married almost 30 years, and he grew up in Haywood County, so just a few counties from me. But when we were married, we both noticed right off things that we didn't, we thought was odd about what each other said. So for instance, if I was, in those days, if we were in the kitchen or something and something rolled under the table, and Matt was looking for it, I would say, Matt, it's under the table right there. If you bend over, you'll see it. If it was swapped and I was looking for it, he would say, Tipper, it's up and under the table. If you'll bend over, you'll see it. It's right there, up and under the table. I said, how could something be up and in under? It doesn't even make sense, Well, then he had one for my family when he started coming around us a lot. And of course, I say it, he knew that. But if you were in my kitchen right now and I said, you walked in and I just got through mopping, I'd say, be careful. You may slide up. I just mopped. Be careful. Matt says, how can you slide up? You can't slide up. It's impossible. You slide down. So even something that silly, but still that we noticed about each other, all these years later, I still don't say up and under, and I doubt Matt says slide up either. I don't think he does. But those kind of differences are really unique. Another kind of highlights those is the comments that I get from people that'll say on one of my videos, they'll say, I was born and raised in Appalachia, and this woman's just making this up. I've never heard one of those words, not one. My entire life, I've never heard one of them. This is just not true. It's made up. And then the opposite of that is someone will say, I was born and raised in I was born and raised in Idaho or California or wherever, and we use all of these words. These are not Appalachian words. These are American words. Every one in the United States uses them. And so those are kind of the two extremes of that kind of argument. And there's lots of course, middle ground in between there. But I do believe someone could have been born and raised in Appalachia and not heard the words that I use. Like I was saying, me and Matt being those few counties away, and we have words that neither one of us, were familiar with, but the other one was like, what's wrong with you? That's beyond common. Sometimes those differences can even be found holler to holler. I mean, actually, even in this, like, and you think in the same community, but even in the different hollers, people would call things differently. And I do believe in that same way that maybe a family in Idaho or California or wherever may use the same words we do. The thing about the words that we use in the language is that we didn't invent most of them. All those sayings or words or phrases, or even the way we pronounce words, they come with the people who come here and settle. The people from Scotland, from Ireland, from Germany and England, all those places. And Appalachia as a whole, the whole mountain part, was isolated. So a lot of the people that settled in those places, they stayed put. My family has been in Western North Carolina for over 10 generations. That's a lot of people in the same general area passing down those words and those phrases. And that's not uncommon for, like, my friends, the kids I went to school with, grammar school, high school, a lot of them could say that same thing. And a lot of them are still here like I am and raising their kids. So it's another generation. So if your family come through here and then went on to Idaho or California or wherever, and then they stayed there for several generations, again, and they continued that kind of familial culture that Appalachians are known for, then it only makes sense that they would have took those words with them. It's really fascinating, though, all the language. You can tell I've been writing about language since 2008. It's something that's really dear to my heart. And, of course, I'm focusing on the accent and the words and the phrases and all that's used in Appalachia. That's because that's my culture. That's what I'm focusing on. But I do think it's interesting, like the accent challenge. There's people all over the world that did that. And I love all those accents from different countries, from New York, from New Jersey, California, all those unique ones from way down south. I have even Pastor Lon and Robbie Lynn, their channel, The Homestead and Pastor, they have a totally different accent than I do. I have a friend, Rooney Floyd. He lives in South Carolina like Pastor Lon, and he has that same kind of, I think of it as a deep South accent. I love it. I love all of them. It's just the one I'm most passionate about, of course, is my own. I hope you'll leave a comment and tell me what you thought about this video, anything that jumped out at you about it. I'll leave a link to the test, the accent test, in case you want to do it or share it with your family or anything like that. Even leave me a comment. Are you a Appalachia? You say Appalachia like I do, or maybe you say Appalachia. I think both are fine. As always, I hope you'll drop back by often and help me celebrate Appalachia, which is for me a lot of the language. I love it. I'm plumb foolish about it. Our wonderful foodways, the beautiful landscape we live in, and much, much more.